Well, with the 2017 PFA season, regular season, I mean to say, over, and we're now getting ready for the playoffs, I believe for the first time ever, I'm actually going to do my own predictions for the playoffs, because last year, all I did was release the schedule in its own video. I don't think I made my own predictions. Anthony did, but I don't think I did one for myself. So, here's my thoughts for the playoffs as we take a look at the bracket, as here it is. Of course, in the National Conference, the Birmingham Hornets and the Manhattan Greens have the byes, and the San Antonio Longhorns will visit the Denver Miners, and the Jacksonville Bucks will visit the Oakland Majors. In the Century Conference, it's the Chicago 71ers and the El Paso Mustangs with the byes, with the Seattle Quakes visiting the Miami Sharks and the Oklahoma Oilers visiting the Pittsburgh Blitz. And if you already saw the schedule, didn't watch the video where I reveal the schedule, for wild card, it will be Seattle and Miami, then San Antonio at Denver, then Oklahoma at Pittsburgh, and finishing off with Jacksonville at Oakland for the wild card round. Divisional, it'll be, first game will be at Manhattan, then El Paso, then at Chicago, and then finish off at Birmingham. We don't know their opponents yet. And of course, we have the Century Conference, which will be first championship, and then the National Conference Championship after that, and then finally PFA Bowl 2 up in East Rutherford. So we start off with my prediction first with Seattle at Miami. Miami's first ever home playoff game, and Seattle's first ever playoff appearance. Seattle's on a roll. I think they've won like 4 in a row or something like that. They've been really on a roll, looking sharp this time. Meanwhile, the Sharks have kind of struggled the last few bunch of weeks. They have like a 3-game win streak or something like that, if I'm correct. And they still are impressive, but they don't look as dumb as they were last year. But they're at the home. They're still playing tough. I'm not fully trusting Seattle on the road against a really tough team now in Miami. So I think Miami still will get the victory, which sets them up at El Paso, and Pittsburgh or Oklahoma will have to face Chicago. Alright, after that, it will be the San Antonio Longhorns visiting the Denver Miners, as the Miners, this will be their first ever home playoff game, and San Antonio making the playoffs for the first time ever. These two played each other in the regular season. I think they split it between each other. And oh boy, Denver, remember, they were one of my favorites in the National Conference to make it the PFA Bowl 2, but they struggled throughout the season, and all of a sudden near the end, they turned it around and made a huge playoff run and just barely got in, thanks to Omaha completely collapsing at the end. And San Antonio was struggling as usual at the beginning of the part of the season, but they turned around and stayed right there and managed to get into the playoffs. This will be interesting. Denver last year was a very explosive offense, but a terrible defense. This time around, their defense is pretty good, and their offense is unfortunately really inconsistent. And San Antonio, meanwhile, has one of the best offenses in the league, but their defense is pretty bad. So it's down to who you trust. Denver's strong defense with their inconsistent offense, or San Antonio's strong offense and terrible defense. I think, yeah, Denver, I believe, beat San Antonio when they hosted them early in the year. So I trust Denver more than I do San Antonio. So I think Denver will get the victory, which sets them up at Manhattan, and Jacksonville or Oakland will have to go to Birmingham. After that, it's the Oklahoma Oilers visiting the Pittsburgh Blitz, as the Oilers are making the playoffs for the first time ever. And, oh boy, Pittsburgh, they've struggled the early part of the year, but then they turned around and had one of the best defenses. Their point differential is still pretty good, it's just they can't get the wins like they did last year. Oklahoma, their offense is really good. Their defense has been kind of lacking after the beginning part of the season, mostly due to injuries. But the main problem for Oklahoma is their quarterback situation. Remember, they got both Peter Rose and Wiley Chester, but both quarterbacks have suffered injuries. They can't stay healthy. Peter Rose has been knocked out 4 times for crying out loud this season. And unfortunately for Oklahoma, Wiley Chester, who they had to be the starter the first bunch of weeks, the last bunch of weeks, has a scratched cornea, so he's questionable for this week. So who knows if he'll even play whatsoever, so Peter Rose might get denied. So that instability with the quarterback position, plus their defense not really good, I think Pittsburgh might take advantage of this and get the win, which sets them up at Chicago. And then the final wild card game, of course, is San Antonio. Jacksonville Bucks visiting the Oakland Majors. These were two teams are making the playoffs for the first time ever. They were teams with losing records last year. Both reversed. Jacksonville had an explosive offense, but just a terrible defense. Oakland had a terrible offense, but a pretty strong and stingy defense. So these two teams, they struggled the last bunch of weeks, but they were pretty tough throughout the season. Now, of course, there's really no problem by and large with Jacksonville, as they don't really have much injuries. But Oakland, oh boy, they got injury problems all over the place. But most devastating of all, Ruben Williams, the quarterback that they traded for, who's been inconsistent all season, is doubtful for next week, as he suffered an injury during their game against El Paso this last week. So he might not start, which means his backup might play, which, oh boy, I mean, he wasn't necessarily that good. He wasn't worth the trade, but he's better than whatever they have. So I actually think unless Jacksonville completely collapses or Oakland puts up one hell of a defense, I think Jacksonville might pull it off. I trust their offense more than I trust Oakland's defense of holding them off and their offense getting points. So Jacksonville will get this as we end the wild card round. And with that, it's now into the divisional round, as we start off with the Denver Miners visiting the Manhattan Greens, as the Greens would make the playoffs for the first time ever, as they're trying to be the first team to host the championship game, as MetLife Stadium hosts PFA Bowl 2 this year. And this will be interesting. Like I said, Denver, very strong defense, but their offense is inconsistent. Meanwhile, Manhattan, their offense is good. It's just not as good as it was last year, but their defense last bunch of weeks has played really good. Now, the main concern, however, for Manhattan is their offense, believe it or not, as Jamie Norwood was injured. He is going to be able to play this week, but he got injured pretty badly, and offense kind of struggled too. So I think Manhattan might have to rely more on their defense than they are their offense. And I don't know. I don't know if I can fully trust them. I mean, their defense played very good, but that concern about the offense was pretty scary. And, of course, they're not going up against Tampa like they did last week when they destroyed them. They're going up against Denver, who is definitely a playoff team. So I think this will come down the wire. It might actually be a defensive struggle, but I think this might be a really huge upset. But I think I might have Denver pulling it off on the road, knocking off Manhattan, preventing the host the title game. And with that, Denver would make the National Conference Championship for the first time ever. After that, it's the Miami Sharks visiting the El Paso Mustangs, as the El Paso is playing their first ever playoff game. Now, this will actually be quite interesting. This would probably be the more interesting matchup in terms of like strength of teams in the Century Conference side of the divisional round. Miami's a pretty good team. El Paso's been really good all year. They're honestly probably underrated, believe it or not, how their performance is, probably because once again, they can't win games unless they score 20 plus points or something like that. That still is a trend they continued from last year as well. But James Fabinovic has struggled sometimes parts of the year, but he's still been pretty good. Allen Davis, of course, their running back, has been strong. Their defense is up there as one of the best in the league. So, since Miami has struggled the last bunch of weeks and they've been kind of inconsistent on offense at least, I think El Paso might hold off and pull off the victory, and with that, El Paso will be in the Century Conference Championship for the first time ever. Next is the Pittsburgh Blitz visiting the Chicago 71ers in the rematch of the 2016 National Conference Championship, as, oh boy, these two, of course, played each other last year, and the road team actually won both games, so you think maybe Pittsburgh actually can pull it off, so you gotta watch out for that too. But, of course, the main problem for Chicago is going to be their quarterback play. Their offense is kind of sluggish, but still consistent. Their defense has been unbelievable, the second best defense in the league. But remember, Matthew Smart, the leader of the offense, is injured again. So who knows if he's going to be playing? He should. I mean, he's got a whole week off for rest and such. So that can really determine if the Chicago 71ers are going to make it farther if Matthew Smart plays. I think he will. And I mean, Robert Mullen did actually beat Pittsburgh last year when they knocked Matthew Smart out of the playoffs with his injury. So, and I think the defense would probably do their best. There is going to be a defensive struggle. And I think regardless if Mullen or Smart plays, I think the 71ers will still pull it off as they once again make it back-to-back conference championship appearances. And then we finish off the divisional round with the Jacksonville Bucks visiting the Birmingham Hornets. Oh boy, this has become like a big rivalry in the National South between two contrasting teams. Jacksonville's offense against Birmingham's sack and sting defense, which is the number one defense in the league and probably one of the best defenses in professional football history. Now, Birmingham swept Jacksonville last year too, this year. So Birmingham has quite an advantage too. They're going to be at home. They have a week off, so they'll be rested up and not have to worry about injuries probably. So I think Birmingham will probably pull it off probably convincingly. So that'll send them to the National Conference for the first time ever. Now it's the conference championships, starting off with the Century Conference, who will be the home team this year, as El Paso Mustangs visit the Chicago 71ers. Chicago is going to have to pay very close attention to El Paso. They're not a team that you can just dismiss. They are pretty damn good, and they're going to give Chicago all they can to get this game, to get the win. And, of course, I think this will rely more on Matthew Smart being able to play, which he should, since he will have definitely 2 weeks off by then if he's able to play and such. Oh, boy, this could be a really tough one. It really probably would depend on Robert Mullen or on Matthew Smart plays. But I think Matthew Smart would play, and since their defense is stifling and El Paso's offense has been inconsistent as hell, as long as they can hold El Paso under 20 points too, that would go in their favor as well. So I think Chicago will do it. They'll make it to their second PFA Bowl, which will be back-to-back years they make as they try to make up for last year's loss. And then we finish it off with the National Conference Championship, who are the away teams this year for PFA Bowl, as the Denver Miners visits the Birmingham Hornets in a rematch from their wild card matchup from last year. Holy crap, this will be so exciting. Remember, Birmingham won that game 13-9. They shut down Denver's strong offense completely in that game, but they couldn't get anything going on offense. But times are different now. Birmingham has an even stronger defense. Their offense is still bad, but it's being a lot more consistent with rookie quarterback Ollie Burke. And Denver, of course, like I said, flip. Good defense now and inconsistent offense. This is probably going to be a defensive struggle, and it's really going to come down to the quarterbacks and the offense. Who's going to make the least mistakes? Because whoever causes the more mistakes and turnovers and gets points off it is going to get the win, probably. Now, of course, you'd think, well, Zachary Ellis is most certainly better than Ollie Burke. True. But he has to go up against the best defense in the league, and probably the best defense of all time. And last year, when it was not as good, he struggled. Now he's not as good as he was last year, and he's going up against a much stronger Birmingham team. Do you really trust him to do that against Ollie Burke, maybe struggling against Denver's strong defense? Sack and sting is a thing. That defense is so good it can become the offense if it needs to. I think just barely, maybe Denver could pull it off, but I think Birmingham will do it. And with that, Birmingham will win the National Conference Championship and be in PFA Bowl for the first time ever. And with that, PFA Bowl 2 is set. The National Conference champion, Birmingham Hornets, going up against the Century Conference champion, Chicago 71ers. The 71ers would make it back-to-back titles, and Birmingham would make their first ever appearance. This game will be solely defense. Last year we saw Omaha and Chicago play with Matthew Smart not playing, so Omaha was able to destroy him 35-9. This one I think is going to be much closer, and it's going to be defensive like I said. These are the two best defenses in the league going up against each other. And again, it's going to rely on who makes the least mistakes, be it Matthew Smart for Chicago or Ollie Burke for Birmingham. Now, of course, Matthew Smart is playing better than Ollie Burke, but he has to go up against the number one defense in the league. Now, what helps Chicago is they did play post Birmingham this year and they won. That helps, but they're not going to be in Chicago this time. They're going to be in East Rutherford. They're not going to be at home, even though they're a home team. There's going to be no home field advantage here, so it's going to be tough. It's going to be pretty tough for both teams. It can go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these teams went, mainly because of their defense. It's going to rely on who makes the least mistakes. But, like I said, sack and sting is a thing. They can stop offenses, and they can become the offense if need to. And although Chicago's defense is second best, they just don't have that same muster like Birmingham's defense does. And I think that will probably, maybe, pull it off for Birmingham. I think they would get the win, and they'll get their first ever championship. But it can go either way in the playoffs for either one. Chicago can easily pull it off too. And just like Birmingham and Chicago, the 10 other teams have a shot to maybe do it as well. So leave your thoughts in the comments. That's my prediction. I think Birmingham will beat Chicago in PFA Bowl 2 to get their first title. Leave your thoughts. I know Anthony already said he's going to make his video. Hopefully everyone else will make their own comments or videos too on this on the playoffs, as hopefully soon I'll get ready to start simulating the playoffs. So see you soon for the wild card round.